Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Cleaning Lady. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. The continued, when it rains, it pours, because everyone's getting screwed over in some shape or form in this episode. First and foremost, the motel dude came to Fiona. He was like, yo, 10K or I release that video and I give it to the cops. You don't want me to do that, do you? It's like, man, he went above and beyond. Like, he got a buddy that traced her license plate and found out where she lives. And it's like, yeah, I have the video. And obviously Tony's like, there's no way he actually has the video. He could be just lying. It's like, no, he knows Chris is the one that pushed Marco. And like, that didn't even come up during the police investigation. Like, how would he even know that unless he actually had the video? So they need to pay him 10K. Obviously, they're not the only ones in money need, because Armand is too. He needs to pay back Robert, but Robert's like, cool, you owe me like 1.6 mil, or we go in like $300,000 like a week installments until it's paid. It's like 329,000 or something like that. It's like nearly like 330, I want to say, something like that. 330,000, but they are trying to sell the guns, which doesn't work out for Armand, just like Robert said it wasn't going to. It's like, no, work with me. Like, give me the gun business, because you think, yes, you might have built up Hayek's empire, but Hayek's the one that had the capital. You're going to need my investment to make things happen. But Armand wanted to sell the guns and be done with it. It's like, moment I pay you out, we're good, we're golden, boom. But literally no one wants to touch him with a 10-foot pole. Use that turn of phrase literally in something else, other review. Because, yeah, the FBI are sniffing up your ass. I mean, Garrett even said, like, oh, you won't even be able to sell a bullet in this town. He's like, yeah, a bullet's all I need. I was like, oh, that's kind of a badass moment. And then closing the door and them just standing on opposite sides of the door from each other, just staring each other down. It's like, yeah, Garrett's like looking for an excuse. He's like, oh, you better keep your nose clean, because like you might be walking free, but I'm just looking, because I know I give you 6 months before you end up locked up again. So that's the situation Armand finds himself in. And, you know, because he would rather go ahead and pay Robert back, because he knows, like, right, he already went through enough being under one person, that being Hayek. Like, he was under Hayek for so long. It's like, and Robert, especially consider Robert and Nadia have the history that they have. It's like, the last thing I'm going to be is subservient to that bastard. So it's like, right, we're going to pay him his money and be done with all this. Granted, they don't really have a leg to stand on, because they are completely boxed out of the gun business. But at the same time, well, Tony's dealing with the fact is that, first and foremost, she's got to get Luca's medications, because his circumstances are, he can't go without this medication, because if he does, his body will eventually completely reject his liver and it'll go into liver failure. So, but their friend Samantha, she's also diabetic, but Vinny's not giving her like the full medication she's supposed to be getting, or like the dosage is wrong. So she nearly had we almost went into a diabetic coma. Luckily for them, it's like, yeah, Tony has having someone like Tony as amongst them, like having that like a doctor background, and then their douchebag boss is like, oh, cool, are you okay, Samantha? Okay, cool, 20 minutes, you need to clean this up. Or it's like, if you don't do it, I'm gonna have to let you go, Samantha. It's like, because he knows he can push them around, because he knows they have no other choices. Like, if you had other choices, you wouldn't be here. But Fiona was like, you know what, fuck you, fuck this Alonzo. Chop, chop, you get the cleaning. So she bounces, so does Tony, and everyone else leaves too, because they're planning on starting their own cleaning business. And it's like, right, they hire the other ladies, give them a decent wage, be able to help them out, especially with Tony's medical coverage, like, because Samantha doesn't have insurance, so she can't get the actual insulin she needs. That's why she has to go through a shady backdoor deal situation like Vinny. So, but it's like the whole starting their cleaning business hasn't really started yet. That was the whole point of, yes, Armand can launder his money through it, but before we even get to that, Armand's got to deal with the whole Robert thing and the money situation on that front. So now it is a situation of, okay, so how are we going to deal with this, especially with Vinny's like guy that gets medication across the border. He got caught up and arrested. So now what are we going to do? So Tony turns to Armand and even suggests, like, right, it could be a win-win situation. You sell the like, we do this whole thing, like, you could sell medication. There's a lot of people who can't get this medicine through the legal means because they don't have the insurance necessary to pay for it, the money to pay for. We can, like, make a good back-end deal off of this. Plus, she ends up getting Luca's medication in the long run. That's mainly why Armand was initially doing it, just for Tony's sake. But because they're backed into a wall, he's keen on doing this idea. Granted, Nadia's not all that keen on the idea, simply because it's Tony's idea, because she knows, like, there's something like Armand kind of goes above and beyond for Tony, and that's just, it rubs her the wrong way. So if it was something unrelated to Tony, and at the very least he's not lying about it, he is being more upfront about, like, it is Tony's idea, the medicine's for her son, he needs to live. It's like, the fact is he has such a soft spot for Tony, once again, bothers Nadia to no end. So it's like, okay, we'll make this, we'll do this. It's like, right, because Tony knows what medication's in need, and it's like, right, we can make a decent enough, I know what medicines are very in high demand and the ones that will give you the largest profit. And I love Armand having to be the broker between the situations. Like, the only way this is going to work, if we have to work together, we all have to work together, which is like, cool, you're in business with your wife and your mistress. It's like, oh man, this is super not going to blow up in your face. It's like, right, nothing's happened between you and Tony since last season, but still, like, the feelings are there. Like, you're willing to go above and beyond, like, listen to Tony's suggestions because she's done so much for you and you've done so much for Tony. So there's that, and Nadia's also feeling and vibing off of that, which, once again, the timing is interesting because her exes come back into the picture, and you can definitely tell, like, he wants to pick things up where they were. Like, it's probably like whether that becomes like a torrent affair between them or what. I don't know whether, like, maybe something happens between Tony and Armand, and the fact is that he uses that Robert uses that to get Nadia more on his side and get her to turn against Armand. I don't know. We'll have to, wait and see how things kind of play out. But they run through the medication, but it's not enough money to compensate Armand. So Armand has to do a deal for has to do something for Robert in terms like, yeah, this other guy owes me money, which I think that's setting up an interesting stage in the story. We'll talk about the other connection later, but it's like, yeah, go handle this for me. It's like, oh, so was Armand going to be a thug for you? He's like, no. He claims to be a good negotiator, then negotiate. He's like, oh, and while your wife is going to stay here with me, she'll be the collateral. And she already had to give up the ring that was super important to her. Armand wanted to make sure, like, we'll sell everything else, but not the ring. And that's the thing. They weren't short, like, a lot. I mean, it's still a hefty amount of money for, like, any regular person. Like, $58,000 ain't nothing to sneeze at. But it's like, that's how much they were short with how much, all the stuff that they sold in conjunction, because they needed the money really quickly, and in conjunction with the money they made from Tony. I mean, they also, like, took off, like, $10,000 just to pay off the hotel or motel guy. But it's like, that still wouldn't have done it. Even with that 10 grand, they still would have been like 48 grand short. And even Tony's like, right, we got to deal with that. Armand will figure out the situation, which he handled it. And is a guy that is like, okay, I mean, we don't even know who that guy is. He must be somebody important, because they love, like, he's like, yeah, you need to pay back the money. And the guy's like, I will. And he's like, no, you need to do it now. And he's like, what are you going to do? Like, punch it on me? Armand's like, I've done worse, So had to get extra persuasive with choking out his son, especially because he was choking out the son with the one of the tubes from the oxygen mask. So I was like, man, kind of a two for deal moment there. That would have been ironic for him to kill you, strangling you with the tube to your father's oxygen mask. That would have been wild. That'd be a wild way to die. But it's like, yeah, got what I needed, so paid off. Cool. Paid off Robert. Now it's like, cool, I got Nadia, let's leave. But we're not done with Robert. Once again, I think, setting the stage of him filling that void a little bit for Hayek. I mean, granted, it seems like he's already got his own void filled, because while this is all happening, Garrett meets with, like, the head FBI agent in charge of the Cortez case. Interesting enough, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the same actor from Lost Girl. What's his character's name? Was it Hal? I don't remember. It's been so long. It was it was him and Kinsey. They were a thing until like I won't say because it was about a major Lost Girl spoiler. But either way, putting that aside, and I love like the contentious like well not just contentious, just like the contempt in general he holds for you know Garrett and the way he handles things. It's like, oh yeah, that very cowboy approach that you've had towards things. It's like it's kind of landed you in a position that you're in where basically you had to get bitched. And it's like, yeah, like you can go ahead and sleep with the rule books underneath your pillow, but when you really want a close investigation, you know where to find me. And also just rubbing salt in the wound. You also know this used to be my office, so it's almost like you didn't really earn anything, and it kind of all got handed to you because I got taken off the case because I was like the head guy. Sometimes you have to crack a few eggs. It's like, yeah, I don't know if that's what you call sleeping with a CI and putting them in it's like, kind of goes about things the most douchey way, especially because he's like, yeah, Tony, I need your help. It's like, you're kind of asking for help, but it's like, no, I'm not actually asking you for help. I'm blackmailing you because I know that it was Fiona going in. She might have been wearing wigs and stuff, but I'm sure that was Fiona going in there with the cryptocurrency stuff related to Armand. So I was like, cool. If you don't want your sister-in-law to end up in jail and then eventually potentially deported, then you need to help me. It's like, once again, getting screwed on all front. You're being blackmailed on one front, you're being blackmailed on the other. You're doing everything you can to make sure you keep the medication that Luca needs in rotation. So it's like, plus trying to start a cleaning business, and there's so many, not just Fee and Tony, but all the other ladies that quit because of them. It's like, yeah, like they need like so many plates are spinning at one time, and it's just like, yeah, you can't keep juggling these all forever. There's going to be some broken plates. So I did like Tony's approach to get close to Maya. It's what this was all about. And like, is this even about Cortez's? I mean, I guess it is. I was like cloning her phone will help you find out about, because she is like working for Cortez, so it'd be the easiest thing. But I'm also like, side note, one of the people that's working with him, if I'm not mistaken, that's the actor. He was in Person of Interest, but he was also Captain Boomerang in the Arrowverse on CW. I don't think that's Cortez. I think that's probably just like one of Cortez's lieutenants, or maybe it was. I think the guy that were more so like the pictures that Garrett was more so focused on, I think that was Cortez. But either way, I thought it was pretty slick how Tony was just like, oh yeah, I'm the person in the bathroom that kind of gives you a napkin and stuff like that. And the fact is, like, Maya was like using makeup to kind of cover up a black eye, so it's like, yeah, shows you what kind of situation she's in. I'm assuming, like, Garrett found out last episode she's sleeping with Cortez. It's like, not because she wants to, it is just purely self-preservation. You put her in this situation and she got left high and dry, and so she's trying to do whatever she can to survive, because it's like, that's probably most likely definitely not the type of guy you want to be on his ugly side, because, like, right, she has a black eye, God knows what else could be shown. So, and she makes the excuse of like, oh yeah, like I fell and my face hit something, like, sadly that's the two often classic excuse in that regard. But she kind of saw through Tony's like, all right, who sent you? And she said the most interesting thing. She's like, Camdar, and you're like, because Tony noticed it for a second there too. She was like, wait, I just heard Armand mention that. So I'm like, okay, so I guess that's implying that Robert is in bed with Cortez, or at least like Cortez does business with Robert. So that those two storylines I think will converge, which will in turn kind of put Garrett and Armand back in the same, like, Armand is always going to be in Garrett's eye line and eyesight, but the Cortez thing is kind of taking precedence more right now, but both kind of flowing into each other with the Robert and Armand thing might be a 2-for-1 special for him, and especially if it means taking down Cortez too, like, that might all benefit him in the long run on what he wants. And if he makes this happen, and if he makes it all stick, obviously he's going to get himself out of the doghouse that he still continues to be in because of, well, how he handled the whole Cortez thing initially. So it's going to be interesting to see those two in scenes together, because I'm sure Cortez is like, oh yeah, Garrett, and especially if Maya's around, that's going to complicate things more. But and her saying that to Tony, Maya saying that to Tony, what was it that tell Garrett to stop putting like someone like you in a position where you don't belong. It's like, well, Tony's been mixed up in stuff you don't really know about. So like, sadly, this environment's actually a little bit more aligned with some of where Tony's been, but I think it also is a byproduct of like, right, Maya knows more so than anything. Like, Garrett has a tendency to send people, women in particular, into the lion's den. So it's like, right, from her own personal experience and now with Tony. But yeah, but I like I said, I thought that was so interesting where it's like connecting those two stories. I thought I never would have crossed my mind to be like, oh, the connective thread between them would be Robert. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see. Once again, because Tony now has that connection, and so she'll probably tell Armand about it, which they could potentially do what they did with Hayek and try and take Robert down by getting the FBI all up in his ass. Like, if you get him up like Cortez's ass, that might lead to the whole like eventually circling back to Robert. Who knows? I might be reading too much into that. It might not play out like that, but I could definitely see that being an option. But we'll see. Once again, I'm still leaning towards like something's going to happen in Nadia. I mean, obviously, like Robert, he's kind of like, oh, I'm here to, it's like, oh, here you are, my love and everything. Like the way he talks about her, the way he kind of approaches things. Just interesting because like the last thing I saw him in was Naveen Andrews. Once again, was the last thing I saw him in was Instinct, and him and Lizzie's relationship is just kind of interesting. It's just a very interesting comparison of just like, oh, you can almost see things play out to a similar extent with like between Robert and Nadia, just like with Susie Arias. Either way, just something that's kind of like floating in the back of my mind. Either way, we finally move into our last situation, and that's Fiona showing up to the motel by herself. I was like, that's not a good idea. I know you don't want to wait for Tony because it's like, right, you screw up this timetable, this could be bad. Tony was like, right, we're not going to give him the full 10,000. We're just going to like negotiate. But it's like, no. I want this to be done. I want to get the tape. But the moment I'm like, that's how blackmail works. It's never going to be a thing of, oh, no matter what you do, the goalpost is always going to get moved. And what does it happen? The guy's like, oh, so the goalpost is now, you're going to pay me $10K every month. Because you've shown him that, yes, it might take a while, but you made things work and you were able to get $10K. So it's like, yeah, let's keep this up forever and ever. It's like, yeah, he used the excuse of like, yeah, my business was interrupted. Shut up. He saw a business opportunity, a scummy business opportunity. He was going to take advantage of it. Fiona did find out that he's like a pervert watching everyone, so he's keeping an eye on. Makes you wonder, is he blackmailing other people too? Is he just your typical like peeping Tom, just looking on other stuff? And Fiona was threatening him, and it's like, oh, you're going to threaten me? Like, oh, let's see how that turns out. I'm like, oh, this is going to be bad. I figured it wasn't going to be bad for Fiona in the regard of like, I doubt he's going to hurt Fiona, but Fiona's going to hurt him, and Tony's going to have to come clean this up. It's just like, oh man, it's one thing after another, isn't it? And so she bashed him over the head. Like, he might not be dead, but at the very least he's knocked out. I mean, he might be dead just because of the concussion or something, but I'm assuming he's just knocked out. So she's going to have to call Tony to kind of help. It's just, this Chris thing and this whole Marco thing just continues to, once again, move the goalposts. It's just like, okay, we're clear. Well, we're not. Well, we're on our way to being clear. Well, we're not. Just that goalpost keeps getting moved further and further. It's just like, yeah, no one's winning right now. Everyone in this show is losing to some extent. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.